My husband threw his head back, laughter booming across the VIP table at the gilded cage, while I sat there wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. He wiped a tear from his eye and pointed a finger at me as the waiters refilled our crystal champagne flutes. You guys think Jasmine is this mysterious, quiet intellectual because she works at a library, right? Well, let me tell you the truth. She is just as boring behind closed doors. Honestly, it is like sleeping with a piece of plywood. She is absolutely terrible in bed. The entire table erupted in laughter. My sister-in-law Sarah covered her mouth to hide a smirk, and even my own brother-in-law Andre chuckled nervously. I gripped the stem of my wineglass so hard I thought it might shatter in my hand. Humiliation burned my cheeks like a physical slap. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Suddenly, a heavy hand slammed down on the white tablecloth, making the silverware jump. The laughter died instantly. Liam, who had been silent the entire evening, leaned forward. His steel-gray eyes locked onto my husband with terrifying intensity. That is not true, Derek. That is a lie. She is amazing. I have never seen anyone move with such passion. The silence that followed was deafening. Every pair of eyes at the table shifted from Liam to me and back to my husband, whose face was rapidly turning a shade of purple I had never seen before. Before I tell you what happened next in this nightmare of an anniversary dinner, let me introduce myself. My name is Jasmine and I am 31 years old. If you have ever felt small in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to know where you are watching from, so leave a comment below. Trust me, you will want to stick around to see how a quiet librarian brought an entire dynasty to its knees. The evening had started off wrong from the moment I stepped out of the shower. Derek had laid out a dress on the bed for me. It was red tight and cut so low in the front that I felt exposed just looking at it. It was a dress for a trophy wife, not for me. When I hesitated, Derek had sighed, that heavy, impatient sigh that always made my stomach knot. "Do not start, Jasmine," he had said, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. "Tonight is important. My brother and his wife are coming. Liam is coming. These people are elite, Jasmine. I need you to look the part, not like someone who spends all day dusting old books." So I put on the dress. I squeezed my feet into heels that pinched my toes and let him drag me to the Gilded Cage, the most pretentious restaurant in Buckhead, Atlanta. The air inside smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Chandeliers the size of small cars glittered overhead, and the sound of polite, hushed conversations filled the room. I felt like an imposter. I always did when I was with Derek's family. We were seated at a prime table near the window overlooking the city skyline. Sarah, my sister-in-law, was already there sipping a martini. She looked flawless in a way that seemed aggressive. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her white silk blouse probably cost more than my first car. Next to her was Andre, Derek's older brother, who looked like a softer, more defeated version of my husband. And then there was Liam, Sarah's brother. Liam was different. He was a venture capitalist known for ruthless business deals. But tonight, he sat quietly swirling his scotch, observing everything with eyes that missed nothing. I tried to make myself small in my chair, pulling the napkin onto my lap to cover the exposed skin of my thighs. "So, Jasmine Sarah," began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "Derek tells us you are still at the city library. That is so quaint. I suppose it must be nice to have a job with zero stress. Must give you plenty of time to read romance novels while the rest of us are actually working." She flashed a perfect white smile, waiting for a reaction. I took a sip of water to steady my voice. "Actually, Sarah, archiving historical documents is quite demanding. We are currently restoring records from the civil rights movement, and—" Derek cut me off, his hand landing heavily on my shoulder. "What she means is she files papers." He laughed, looking around the table for approval. "I keep telling her to quit. I mean, it is embarrassing, right? My wife making minimum wage stamping books. I told her, baby, I make enough money for the both of us. You should just stay home and work on your appearance. Maybe go to the gym more. The insult was casual practiced. He did this all the time at home, but hearing it here in front of his wealthy family made it sting 1,000 times worse. Sarah's eyes lit up. She loved this. She loved seeing me put in my place. "Oh, Derek, you are too generous," Sarah cooed, tilting her head. "Most men would want a wife who brings something to the table. Besides, you know looks. But it is sweet that you keep her around. It is like a charity project." I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes. I looked at Derek, begging him silently to stop this, to defend me. But he was beaming. He was enjoying the camaraderie with Sarah more than he cared about my dignity. He wanted to fit into their world so badly that he was willing to use me as a stepping stone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Excuse me," I whispered, intending to go to the restroom to compose myself. "Sit down," Jasmine Derek commanded, his voice sharp. "We are making a toast." I froze halfway out of my chair, then slowly sat back down. The waiter poured more champagne. Derek stood up, raising his glass. His face was flushed with alcohol and arrogance. "To 5 years of marriage," he announced. "5 years of me putting up with this one." He gestured to me with the glass liquid sloshing over the rim. Everyone chuckled politely except Liam, who was watching me closely, his expression unreadable. "You know, guys," Derek continued, emboldened by the attention, "marriage is all about compromise. I bring the money, the style, the vision. And Jasmine, well, she brings the silence." He laughed at his own joke. "But seriously, folks, people ask me, Derek, how do you stay faithful to a librarian? Is it the glasses? Is it the strict attitude?" And I have to tell them, nah. It is definitely not the passion. This was where the night fell apart. This was the moment he decided to cross the line from mean to unforgivable. He leaned in conspiratorially, speaking loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I mean, come on, look at her. Look." He pointed the glass at my chest. "Does that look like a wild woman to you? She is like a dead fish in the sack. No rhythm, no movement, nothing. I swear sometimes I have to check for a pulse." The laughter that followed was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my husband selling my privacy for a cheap laugh. It was the sound of Sarah's delight at my humiliation. I looked down at my plate, focusing on the gold rim of the china, trying to breathe, trying not to let the first tear fall. That was when the glass hit the table. Bam! The sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. The laughter was cut off instantly. Liam had slammed his scotch glass down so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. He didn't look at his sister. He didn't look at Andre. He stared straight at Derek. "That is not true," Liam said, his voice low but carrying a weight that made the air in the room feel heavy. Derek blinked, his smile faltering. "Excuse me." "That is a lie," Liam repeated louder this time. "She is amazing. I have never seen anyone move with such passion. She has fire in her veins, Derek. If you think she is a log, then you must be blind or incredibly incompetent." My heart stopped. I looked up at Liam, and for the first time our eyes met fully. In that split second, I realized he knew. He wasn't talking about sex. He was talking about the stage. He recognized me. The man sitting across from me, the billionaire investor, wasn't just Sarah's brother. He was the patron who had sat in the front row of the opera house 5 years ago. He had seen the black swan dance before I clipped my own wings to marry a man who thought I was nothing. Derek stood there, mouth open, looking from Liam to me, confusion and jealousy starting to twist his features into something ugly. The silence at the table stretched out thick with tension and unasked questions. And in that silence, I knew my quiet life was over. The war had just begun. The valet brought our car around. It was a silver BMW that Derek insisted on leasing because he said it projected the right image for a creative director, even though the monthly payments kept us living paycheck to paycheck. He snatched the keys from the attendant without a word and got in, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I slipped into the passenger seat, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The drive home was terrifying. The silence inside the car was heavier than the humid Atlanta air outside. Derek merged onto the highway without signaling, cutting off a minivan that honked in protest. He did not even flinch. His knuckles were white as he gripped the leather steering wheel, and his jaw was set so tight I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and red, trying to make myself invisible. "So, how much did he pay you?" Derek's voice broke the silence, sudden and sharp like a whip. I turned to look at him, confused. "What are you talking about, Derek? Don't play dumb with me, Jasmine." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound that made my skin crawl. Liam, the billionaire, the man who has never looked at a woman twice in his life, suddenly stands up at dinner to defend my boring wife. How do you know him? Did you meet him at the library? Or does he like plain women because they are desperate and cheap? Derek, please stop. I have never met him before tonight. I don't know why he said those things. Liar. He slammed his hand on the dashboard, making me jump. You slept with him, didn't you? That is why he knows you have fire. That is why he knows about your passion. My God, Jasmine, I thought you were useless in bed, but apparently you were just saving the performance for someone with a bigger bank account. Tears welled up in my eyes again, hot and stinging. It was humiliating enough that he had insulted me publicly, but now this accusation was twisting reality into something sick. I realized then that Derek's ego was so fragile he could not comprehend that someone might appreciate me simply for being a human being. In his mind, my value was only physical and transactional. I am not cheating on you, Derek. I have been faithful to you for 5 years, even when you didn't deserve it. He ignored me, swerving across 3 lanes to take the exit for our subdivision. The tires screeched as we turned onto our street. This neighborhood was his pride and joy. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and neighbors who judged you by the brand of your car. To me, it had always felt like a stage set, beautiful but hollow. He pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Before I could unbuckle my seatbelt, he turned to me, his face twisted in a sneer. "Get inside. We are not done." He didn't wait for me. He stormed up the walkway to the front door, fumbling with his keys. I followed slowly, dragging my feet, feeling a sense of dread settle in my stomach. The house was dark and cold. As soon as I stepped into the foyer, Derek was there, blocking my path to the bedroom. "Give me your phone." "What? No, Derek, I need my phone for work. Give it to me now, Jasmine. And your car keys." He lunged forward and grabbed my purse, ripping it from my shoulder. The strap burned my skin. He dumped the contents onto the hardwood floor. Lipstick, tissues, receipts, and my phone scattered everywhere. He snatched the phone and my keyring, holding them up like trophies. "You are grounded. Like a child because you act like one. You think you can humiliate me in front of my family, in front of Sarah and Andre. I am the one who works 16 hours a day to pay for this house. I am the one who puts clothes on your back. And this is how you repay me, by flirting with my brother-in-law right under my nose." I stared at him, seeing a stranger. This man with the wild eyes and the smell of expensive scotch on his breath was not the man I thought I married. Or maybe he was, and I had just been too blind to see it. "I didn't flirt, Derek. He defended me because you were being cruel. You told everyone I was terrible in bed. You mocked me. How did you expect him to react?" "I expected loyalty." He roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I expected my wife to know her place. But clearly, you need a reminder of who is in charge here. Until you are ready to tell me the truth about you and Liam, you are not going anywhere. You are not driving my car. You are not texting your little librarian friends. You stay here and you think about what you have done." He pointed a shaking finger toward the guest room down the hall. "Sleep in there. I can't even look at you right now. You make me sick." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that this house was bought with my inheritance, that the car payments came from my savings account because he blew his bonus on golf clubs. But I couldn't. Not yet. The legal paperwork for the transfer of the deed was still processing, and if I tipped my hand now, he could destroy everything. So I walked past him, my head held high despite the trembling in my hands. I entered the guest room and heard the door slam behind me. A second later, the lock clicked from the outside. He had locked me in. I sank down onto the edge of the cold, unused bed and buried my face in my hands. How did it come to this? My mind drifted back 5 years to a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. Derek's father, Mr. Vance, lay in the bed hooked up to beeping machines. He was a good man, the only one in that family who had treated me with kindness. He didn't care about status or money. He had seen me dance once years ago before the injury that wasn't really an injury. Jasmine, he had whispered, his hand frail in mine. Promise me. Promise me you will look after Derek. He is lost. He needs someone strong. He needs you. I had promised. I was young, grieving the end of my dance career and desperate for a purpose. I thought I could save Derek. I thought my love could fix his insecurity. So I buried the Black Swan. I buried the artist who had performed standing ovations in Paris and Milan. I put on cardigans and glasses. I took a job at the library to stay close to the arts without being in the spotlight. I made myself small so Derek could feel big. I looked around the dark guest room. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting bars of light across the floor like a prison cell. Derek didn't know who he had locked in here. He thought he had trapped a mouse. He didn't realize he had just caged a predator. Liam's words from dinner replayed in my mind. She has fire in her veins. He was right. The fire had been dormant for 5 years, buried under layers of compromise and fear. But tonight Derek had fanned the flames. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. The sadness was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly trimmed hedges of the backyard. My reflection in the glass stared back at me. I wasn't the librarian anymore. I wasn't the victim. You want the truth, Derek? I whispered to the empty room. You want to know about passion? Fine. I will show you passion, but it won't be the kind you can control, and it certainly won't be the kind that saves you. I turned away from the window and began to stretch. My muscles were tight, but the memory of movement was still there deep in my bones. Tomorrow, the war would truly begin, and I was going to win. I woke up with a stiff neck and a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. The guest room mattress was too soft, and the air was stale from the door being locked all night. I laid there for a moment, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, trying to piece together the wreckage of the previous evening. The humiliation at the restaurant. Derek's explosion in the car. The accusation that I was sleeping with a billionaire I had never met. It all felt like a fever dream, but the heavy click of the lock turning from the outside reminded me it was all too real. I waited until I heard Derek's car pull out of the driveway. He always left for the gym at 6 in the morning, obsessed with maintaining the physique that he thought made him superior. Once the rumble of the engine faded down the street, I tried the door handle. It turned. He had unlocked it before leaving, probably assuming I was too broken to go anywhere without my car keys or phone. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The house was quiet, but as I approached the kitchen, I smelled something familiar. It was the rich, nutty aroma of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, my coffee. The expensive blend I kept hidden in the back of the pantry because Derek claimed he could not taste the difference between it and the cheap instant stuff he bought in bulk. Confusion washed over me. Derek never made coffee this early. I rounded the corner into the open-concept kitchen and froze. Sitting at the island on one of the high-backed stools was Sarah. My sister-in-law looked as if she had just stepped out of a catalog for country club wives. She was wearing a pristine white tennis outfit, with a pastel pink sweater draped over her shoulders. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that pulled at her temples, and her skin glowed with expensive moisturizer. But what made my blood boil was not her presence. It was what she was holding. She was drinking from my mug. It was a handmade ceramic mug with a glaze that looked like a stormy ocean. A potter friend from my old life had made it for me, and it was one of the few things in this house that felt truly mine. Sarah was holding it carelessly by the rim, her manicured fingers tapping against the delicate clay. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," Sarah said without turning around. She had heard me coming. I tightened the belt of my silk robe and stepped fully into the room. "What are you doing here, Sarah? How did you get in?" She took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee before swiveling the stool to face me. "Derek gave me a key ages ago, in case of emergencies, and judging by the frantic text messages he sent the family group chat last night, I would say this qualifies as an emergency." She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my messy hair and tired face. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "You look terrible, Jasmine." "Rough night." I ignored the insult. "Put down the mug, Sarah." "Oh, this." She glanced at the ceramic cup as if she had just noticed it. "It is a little heavy for my taste, very rustic, but the coffee is surprisingly decent. I didn't know you could afford this quality on a librarian's salary, or maybe you didn't buy it." The implication hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She was already echoing Derek's delusions, assuming anything nice I owned must have come from an illicit affair. I walked over to the coffee maker and poured myself a cup using a plain white mug. I needed the caffeine to deal with her. "Why are you here, Sarah? If you came to gloat, you can leave." Sarah sighed, placing my mug down on the granite counter with a little too much force. "I am here because I care about this family, Jasmine. I am here because my brother-in-law is distraught. He thinks his marriage is falling apart because his wife has developed delusions of grandeur." She stood up and walked around the island, encroaching on my personal space. She smelled of lilies and old money. "Let us be honest, Jasmine. We both know you do not belong here. When Derek brought you home 5 years ago, we all tried to be welcoming, we really did. But you are just different. You are quiet, you are secretive, and frankly, you are a little dull. We thought at least you were loyal. A nice, simple girl who would be grateful to be lifted up into our world." She paused, waiting for me to react. When I remained silent, she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But now you have set your sights on Liam. That is dangerous territory, Jasmine. Liam is my brother. He is a billionaire. He is royalty in this city. He is used to women throwing themselves at him. Women with pedigree. Women with connections. Women who know which fork to use at a gala." I gripped my mug tighter, the heat burning my palms. "You think I am chasing Liam? Is that what you think?" "I think you saw an opportunity," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. "I think you saw a man who is kind and generous and has a bit of a savior complex. Liam loves a charity case. He probably felt sorry for you at dinner." "That is all it was, Jasmine. Pity. Do not mistake his pity for interest." She reached into her designer purse, which was sitting on the counter. It was a Birkin bag worth more than my car. She pulled out a sleek leather wallet and removed 2 crisp $100 bills. She tossed the money onto the granite counter between us. "Here." I stared at the money. "What is this?" "Consider it a severance package," Sarah said with a sneer. "Take an Uber, go to a spa, get your hair done, fix whatever this is." She gestured vague at my entire body. "But stay away from Liam. If I catch you anywhere near my brother, if I catch you trying to manipulate him with your sob stories, I will make sure you leave this marriage with nothing but the clothes on your back." The disrespect was physical. It felt like she had spit in my face. For 5 years I had swallowed their insults. I had let them treat me like the help, like a ghost in my own home. But staring at those $200, something inside me snapped. I laughed. It was a low, dry sound at first, but it grew. Sarah looked confused. "You think $200 is a lot of money, don't you?" I asked, looking up at her. "It is more than you make in a day shelving books," she snapped. I reached out and picked up the bills. I crumpled them in my hand, slowly maintaining eye contact with her. "You know, Sarah?" I said, my voice steady and cold. "For a woman who prides herself on class, you have absolutely none. You come into my kitchen, you drink my coffee, and you try to bribe me to stay away from a man I have absolutely no interest in. It is pathetic. Sarah's face turned a blotchy red. Excuse me. And another thing, I continued, stepping forward, forcing her to take a step back. You keep talking about your world, your family, your status. But tell me, Sarah, if your family is so wealthy, why is your husband constantly asking Derek for loans? Why is Andre always sweating when the check comes at dinner? How dare you, she hissed. I know about the gambling debt, Sarah. I know about the second mortgage on your house. So take your charity money and use it to pay off the interest on your credit cards. You need it more than I do. I tossed the crumpled bills back at her. They hit her chest and fell to the floor. Sarah let out a screech of rage. Her composure shattered completely. Her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. You ungrateful little trash, she screamed. She raised her hand and swung at my face. It was a fast, vicious slap meant to hurt, meant to put me back in my place. But she was moving in slow motion to me. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. My left hand shot up with the precision of a cobra strike. I caught her wrist inches from my cheek. My grip was iron. Years of lifting my own body weight, years of partnering work and ballet, had given me a strength that was deceptive. My fingers dug into the soft flesh of her wrist, hitting a pressure point. Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in shock. She tried to pull her hand back, but I held her fast. I leaned in close until I could see the flecks of fear in her blue eyes. The air between us crackled. Do not ever raise your hand to me again, I whispered. My voice was low, dangerous. You are hurting me, she whimpered, struggling against my grip. I tightened my hold just for a second longer, letting her feel the power I had been hiding. Get out of my house, Sarah, and wash my mug before you go. I released her wrist with a shove. Sarah stumbled back, clutching her arm as if it were broken. She looked at me with genuine terror. She had expected the mouse. Instead, she had found the wolf. She didn't say another word. She grabbed her purse, leaving the money on the floor, and practically ran out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the front door slam. I stood there in the silence, my heart racing, not from fear but from adrenaline. I looked down at my hand. It was steady. I picked up the mug she had used. I walked to the sink and turned on the hot water, scrubbing it until my skin turned pink. I was washing away her touch. I was washing away 5 years of silence. The war had begun, and I had just won the first battle, but I knew this was just the beginning. Sarah would run to Derek. They would come back harder. I needed to be ready. I needed to get to the library. I needed to find Liam, and most of all, I needed to stop hiding. The Uber ride to the downtown library was a 20-minute humiliation that I had to pay for with my own emergency cash. I sat in the back seat of the Toyota Camry, staring out the window as the city of Atlanta rushed by. I felt naked without my car. Taking my keys was not just about transportation, it was about control. Derek wanted to remind me that without him, I was immobile, helpless, and stranded. He wanted me to sit in that house and stew in my own fear until I was ready to beg for forgiveness. But he had miscalculated. He had forgotten that before I was his wife, I was a woman who had navigated the subways of New York and the streets of London alone. I didn't need a BMW to get to work. I just needed a destination. When the library came into view, a wave of relief washed over me. It was a brutalist concrete structure that most people found ugly, but to me it was a fortress. I walked through the employee entrance, flashing my badge to the security guard, who gave me a warm smile. "Morning, Jasmine," he said. "You are here early today." I just nodded, forcing a smile. I couldn't tell him that I was early because my home had become a war zone. I took the elevator down to the basement archives. This was my domain. The air down here was cool and smelled of dust, aging paper, and preservation chemicals. To some it was the smell of decay, but to me it was the smell of history. It was the smell of truth. I put on my white cotton gloves and unlocked the secure viewing room. I was currently leading a project to digitize and restore a collection of letters from the civil rights movement in the 1960s. These were not just papers. They were voices. They were the handwritten dreams of people who had fought for dignity in a world that wanted to crush them. Derek and his family thought I was just filing papers. They thought I spent my days stamping due dates on romance novels. They had no idea that I was holding history in my hands. They had no idea that the city trusted me with its most valuable secrets. I immersed myself in the work. I focused on the delicate script of a letter written by a young activist in 1963. The precision required to handle these documents calmed my racing heart. It was like dance in a way. Every movement had to be intentional. You could not rush. You could not be careless. You had to respect the material. For 3 hours I forgot about Derek. I forgot about Sarah and her slap. I forgot about the empty bank account and the threats. I was just Jasmine the archivist, the guardian of memory. But the sanctuary could not last forever. I heard the heavy metal door of the archive room creak open. Footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. They were not the soft, rubber-soled steps of the other librarians. These were hard leather soles, confident, heavy, expensive. My stomach dropped. Derek. He had found me. He had come to make a scene at my job, to drag me out by my hair if he had to. I froze my hand hovering over a document. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the shouting match. I turned around slowly, ready to fight. But it was not Derek. Standing in the doorway framed by the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway was Liam. He looked out of place in the basement. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room until they landed on me. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. Jasmine, he said, nodding his head slightly. Please call me Liam. I hope I am not disturbing you. The security guard upstairs was reluctant to let me down here, but I can be persuasive. I took off my cotton gloves, laying them neatly on the table. I walked around the desk, putting a physical barrier between us. Sarah's warning from this morning rang in my ears. Stay away from Liam. If you are here to deliver another message from your sister, you can save your breath, I said, keeping my tone professional but cold. Sarah already paid me a visit this morning. I think we both said everything that needed to be said. Liam's expression darkened. He took a few steps into the room, looking around at the stacks of boxes and the preservation equipment. I didn't know Sarah had come to see you, he said. And knowing my sister, I can only imagine how unpleasant that was. I am sorry, Jasmine. That is actually why I am here. To apologize. I crossed my arms. You don't need to apologize for your family, Mr. Henderson. I am used to it. I am not, he said firmly. What happened at dinner last night was unacceptable. Derek was out of line. Sarah was cruel. And the fact that nobody else at that table stood up for you made me ashamed to be sitting there. He stopped a few feet away from the desk. He looked at me with that same intensity he had shown at the restaurant. It was not pity. Sarah was wrong about that. It was curiosity. I appreciate the sentiment, I said, but you made things complicated. Derek thinks we are having an affair. He thinks I am sleeping with you for money. Liam let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course he does. Insecure men always project their own lack of worth onto everyone else. He cannot fathom that I would defend you simply because it was the right thing to do. He paused, his gaze dropping to my hands, which were resting on the table. But that is not the only reason I defended you, Jasmine. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Here it comes. The proposition. The game. Oh, I asked. And what is the other reason? Liam looked back up at my face. His eyes were gray and piercing like a winter sky. Because I hate seeing talent wasted, and I hate seeing greatness hidden in the dark. I frowned. I don't know what you are talking about. Don't you? Liam asked, tilting his head. When you walked out of the restaurant last night, I watched you. You were angry. You were hurt. But you didn't hunch your shoulders. You didn't stomp. You glided. You hold your neck in a way that most people can't even replicate if they tried. And your turnout. Even in those heels, your feet naturally position themselves in a perfect fourth position when you stand still. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I tried to shift my feet, but I knew it was too late. Muscle memory was a traitor. I saw you, Liam said, his voice dropping to a whisper. 5 years ago. The Metropolitan Opera House in New York. The production was Swan Lake, but it was a modern adaptation. Avant-garde, brutal, beautiful. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to spin. The lead dancer was a revelation. He continued stepping closer. They called her the Black Swan, not because of the role, but because she was the first African-American principal dancer that company had seen in a decade. She was fierce. She didn't just dance, she attacked the music. And then right at the peak of her career, she vanished. A knee injury, they said. Retired at 26. He placed his hands on the edge of the desk, leaning in. I was in the front row, Jasmine. I never forgot that performance. And last night, when I saw the fire in your eyes when Derek insulted you, I recognized it. You are her. You are the Black Swan. The silence in the archive room was absolute. The hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roar in my ears. I had spent 5 years burying that girl. I had buried her under cardigans and silence and lies. I had buried her because Derek needed a wife, not a star. You are mistaken, I said, my voice trembling slightly. That was a long time ago. And a different life. It was a life that fit you better than this one, Liam said, gesturing to the basement. Why are you hiding down here, Jasmine? Why are you letting a man like Derek convince you that you are nothing when you used to be everything? It is complicated, I whispered. It doesn't have to be, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy black cardstock with gold lettering. I am not just an investor in tech startups, Jasmine. My firm is currently looking to revitalize the West End Arts District. We want to build a center for performing arts, a place where the next generation can learn what you know. He slid the card across the desk. We are having trouble with the current ownership of the land. It is tied up in some blind trust, and the owner is refusing to sell to developers who want to build condos. They want to keep it for the arts. I looked down at the card. The West End Arts District. The very project Derek was desperate to bid on. The very land that I owned through my anonymous trust. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Liam was trying to buy my own land from me to build a stage I had walked away from. I need a consultant, Liam said. Someone who understands the soul of an artist. Someone who can help me convince the owner that we are the right partners. He looked at me, expecting me to jump at the chance, expecting me to be grateful. I can't, I said, pushing the card back. My husband, Derek, is bidding on the construction contract for that district. Conflict of interest. Liam's eyes narrowed. Derek is bidding on it. He doesn't have the capital. Or the vision. I know, I said. But he is my husband. For now, Liam said cryptically. He didn't push the card back to me, but he didn't take it either. He just looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and hope. You can hide in this basement as long as you want, Jasmine. You can play the role of the dutiful, invisible wife. But fire burns, and sooner or later, if you don't let it out, it is going to consume you. He straightened up, buttoning his jacket. Think about it, and if you ever decide you want to fly again, call me. He turned and walked out of the archives, his footsteps fading into the distance. I stood there alone again, surrounded by the ghosts of the civil rights movement and the ghost of the woman I used to be. I looked at the black business card on the desk. West End Arts District. Derek wanted to pave it over. Liam wanted to build a stage. And I held the deed to the whole thing. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan that was dangerous, reckless, and absolutely necessary. I picked up the card and tucked it into my bra close to my heart. The sanctuary was compromised, but the stage was being set, and it was time for the Black Swan to make an encore. I stepped out of the library at 5 o'clock sharp, expecting to call another Uber and eat the cost. But as I pushed through the glass doors, I saw the silver BMW idling at the curb. Derek was leaning against the hood wearing his best smile, the one he usually reserved for clients he was trying to charm. In his hand he held a bouquet of flowers, wrapped in crinkly clear plastic. They were carnations, the kind you buy at a gas station when you have forgotten an anniversary 5 minutes before arriving home. I could even see the bright orange discount sticker still peeling off the bottom of the stems. I stopped at the top of the stairs, tightening my grip on my tote bag. The card from Liam burned against my skin, tucked safely inside my bra. I took a deep breath, composing my face into a mask of cautious neutrality. If I was going to play this game, I had to play it perfectly. "Hey baby," Derek called out as I approached. He pushed off the car and held out the flowers. "These are for you. I thought we could use a fresh start after yesterday." I looked at the wilting flowers, and then at his face. His eyes were pleading, but not with regret. They were pleading with calculation. He wanted something. Derek never apologized unless he had an agenda. "Thank you, Derek," I said, taking the flowers. "They smell nice." "I'm sorry about the car keys," he said, opening the passenger door for me, a gesture he hadn't made since our second date. I was just stressed. "You know how much pressure I am under with the firm. I shouldn't have taken it out on you." I got in, placing the sad bouquet on my lap. "It is okay," I lied. The drive home was bizarrely normal. Derek chattered about his day, avoiding any mention of Liam or the dinner or the accusation of infidelity. He turned on the radio and hummed along to jazz acting, as if he hadn't locked his wife in a guest room less than 24 hours ago. It was terrifying how easily he could switch masks. It made me wonder how much of our 5-year marriage had been a performance. When we got home, he didn't head for the couch to watch TV as usual. Instead, he went straight to the kitchen. "I picked up some steaks from that butcher shop you like," he announced, pouring 2 large glasses of red wine. "Go change into something comfortable. I am making dinner tonight." I went to the bedroom and changed out of my work clothes. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who was done being a victim. I washed my face, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and walked back out to the dining room. Derek had set the table with candles. It was almost comical. The romance was so forced it felt like a bad play. We sat down and he served the food, filling the silence with compliments that felt slimy. "This meat is perfectly cooked, isn't it?" he asked. "Only the best for us." "You know, Jasmine, I have been thinking a lot today. About us. About our future." He took a long sip of wine, his eyes watching me over the rim of the glass. "We have been playing small," he said, setting the glass down. "I have been playing small, but I am ready to level up, and I want to take you with me." I cut a piece of steak, keeping my eyes on my plate. "What do you mean, level up?" "I mean the West End project," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper of excitement. "My firm is finalizing the bid. We are going to transform that dump into luxury condos and a high-end shopping plaza. It is a gold mine, Jasmine. We are talking about millions in commissions alone." I chewed slowly, trying not to choke. He was talking about destroying the West End Arts District. My district. The place where young artists found their voice. The place Liam wanted to save. And Derek wanted to turn it into a shopping mall. "That sounds ambitious," I said carefully. "But I thought the competition was fierce." "It is," he admitted, leaning forward. "That is why I need to have my own skin in the game. The partners said if I can bring a certain amount of initial capital to the table, they will make me a lead stakeholder. Not just an employee, Jasmine. A partner. An owner." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was sweaty. "Imagine it, baby. No more budgeting, no more library job for you. You could spend your days shopping, lunching with Sarah, going to the spa. You could have the life you deserve." I pulled my hand back slightly, pretending to reach for my wine. "And how much capital do you need?" 200,000, he said quickly. I stared at him. We don't have $200,000, Derek. Our savings account has 5,000. I know, he said. But we have equity. We have this house. The room seemed to drop in temperature. This was it. The trap. I spoke to the bank today, he continued, speaking faster now. They approved a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit. It is practically free money, Jasmine. We take the money I invested in the West End project, and in 6 months when the condos sell, we pay it back and keep the profit. It is a no-brainer. He reached under his chair and pulled out a leather folder. He placed it on the table between the candles and the cooling steak. I just need your signature, he said, sliding a pen toward me. Since the deed is technically in both our names. I looked at the folder. He had it all ready. He had probably spent the whole day setting this up while I was at work. He wasn't sorry. He was desperate. He needed my signature to gamble our home on a project that I was secretly blocking. The irony was delicious. He wanted to borrow money against a house I paid for to destroy a property I owned. I don't know, Derek, I said, playing the hesitant wife. A second mortgage. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong, he insisted, his voice gaining a hard edge. Don't you trust me? I am the creative director. I know this market. This is our chance, Jasmine. Don't you want me to be successful? Or do you want us to be stuck in this middle-class rut forever? He was manipulating me, using my guilt and his ambition as weapons. If I said no, he would explode. He would go back to the anger, the accusations. He would make my life hell. But if I said yes, a plan formed in my mind, sharp and brilliant. If I signed this document, it would prove he was trying to leverage our shared assets for a risky venture without proper legal counsel. But more importantly, I knew something he didn't. The deed to this house wasn't straightforward. When I bought it with my inheritance, I had used a specific trust structure. Any changes to the lien required a signature that matched the original trust documents perfectly. And the signature on those documents was not Jasmine Vance. It was my stage name. The name I used when I bought the property to keep it hidden. I looked at Derek. He was holding his breath, his eyes wide with greed. Okay, I said softly. I trust you, Derek. Relief washed over his face, making him look almost drunk. You are making the right choice, baby. You won't regret this. He flipped the folder open, pointing to the line at the bottom of the page. Sign right here. I picked up the heavy, expensive pen. I felt the weight of it in my hand. I looked at the paper. Jasmine Vance. That was the name typed under the line. I lowered the pen to the paper. But instead of writing the round looping script I used for my library work, I let my hand remember a different rhythm. I let my wrist flick with the sharp, angular precision of a dancer. I signed the paper. But I didn't sign it as Jasmine Vance the wife. I signed it with the flourish I used to use on autographs. A signature that was legally distinct and completely invalid for this specific document based on the trust's bylaws. To Derek, it just looked like a signature. To a lawyer, it would look like gibberish. I capped the pen and pushed the folder back to him. Done, I said. Derek grabbed the folder, staring at the signature. He didn't even notice the difference. He was too blinded by the dollar signs in his eyes. Perfect, he breathed, closing the folder. I will drop this off at the bank first thing tomorrow. We are going to be rich, Jasmine. He stood up and came around the table, kissing me on the forehead. It felt like a brand. I am going to go put this in the safe, he said. You clean up here. And Jasmine, wear that red dress to bed tonight. I feel like celebrating. He walked out of the room whistling. I sat there in the flickering candlelight looking at the half-eaten steak. I felt a cold smile spread across my lips. Go ahead, Derek, I thought. Take that paper to the bank. Take it to your partners. Bid on my land. You just handed me the weapon I need to destroy you. And you even provided the pen. I stood up and blew out the candles. The room plunged into darkness, but for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one controlling it. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. And Derek had no idea he had just made a deal with the owner of the very thing he wanted to destroy. The country club was a sprawling expanse of manicured emerald grass that smelled of fertilizer and old money. It was the kind of place where memberships were inherited, not bought, and where the staff knew to look through people like me as if we were made of glass. Derek had insisted we come here for a Saturday morning round of golf with Sarah Andre and a few of their wealthy friends. He called it networking. I called it torture. When we arrived at the clubhouse, Derek didn't rent a golf cart for me. He rented one for himself and Andre, and another for Sarah and her friend Beverly, a woman who looked like she had been surgically permanently surprised. "You can walk," Derek had said, tossing his heavy leather golf bag at my feet. "It is good exercise. Besides, we need a caddy. The club is short-staffed today." He laughed as if it were a joke, but his eyes were cold. He wanted me to walk. He wanted me to carry his bag like a servant while he rode in comfort. It was another punishment, another reminder of my place after the dinner incident. I looked at the heavy bag, then at him. For a second I thought about refusing, but I remembered the signed mortgage papers in the safe, the trap I had set. I needed to keep playing the part of the submissive wife just a little longer. I picked up the bag, slinging the strap over my shoulder. The weight dug into my collarbone instantly. "Led the way," I said quietly. The first 4 holes were a nightmare. The Georgia sun beat down on my neck and sweat trickled down my back, soaking into the cheap polyester polo shirt I had bought at a discount store. Sarah and Beverly rode ahead in their cart, looking crisp and cool in their white designer linen outfits. Every time they stopped, they would whisper and giggle, glancing back at me, struggling with the bag. "Oh, look," Sarah said loud enough for me to hear as I trudged up a hill. "She is sweating so much. I suppose synthetic fabrics just don't breathe very well, do they?" Beverly tittered, covering her mouth. "It is charming, really. Very rustic. Like having a real Sherpa." I kept my head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. My legs burned, but thanks to years of intense dance training, my stamina was better than all of them combined. I wasn't out of breath. I was just angry. Derek was playing terribly. He was trying too hard to impress Andre and the other men, forcing his swing and chopping at the ball. On the 5th hole, he sliced his drive deep into a sand trap. "Damn it," he yelled, slamming his driver into the turf. He turned and glared at me as I caught up to them. "It is you. You are breathing too loud back there. It is distracting me." "I haven't said a word, Derek," I replied, setting the bag down. "You are hovering. Just stand back. You are bad luck." I stepped back into the shade of a tree, crossing my arms. I watched him flail in the sand, taking 3 shots just to get back onto the green. It was pathetic. This was the man who claimed he was going to revitalize the West End Arts District, yet he couldn't even navigate a bunker. By the 9th hole, the group decided to make things interesting. "Let us make a bet," Andre suggested, wiping his forehead with a monogrammed towel. "Loser buys dinner at Le Bernardin tonight. For everyone." Derek paled. Le Bernardin was incredibly expensive, and thanks to his gambling habits and the fact that the loan money hadn't hit his account yet, he couldn't afford a $5,000 dinner. But his ego wouldn't let him back down. "You are on." Derek said, his voice cracking slightly. The pressure was on. The 9th hole was a par 3 over a small lake. It required precision, not power. Sarah went first, hitting a decent shot that landed on the edge of the green. Andre followed, landing safely in the middle. Then it was Derek's turn. He was sweating profusely now. He pulled out an iron, his hands shaking. He swung. Thwack! The ball soared high but hooked sharply to the left, splashing distinctly into the water hazard. "No," Derek screamed. "That club is defective." He turned to me, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "Give me another ball. Hurry up." I reached into the pocket of the bag and tossed him a ball. He teed up again. He swung again. Splash! The second ball joined the first in the lake. The group fell silent. Sarah let out a sigh of exaggerated pity. "Oh dear, Derek. Looks like you are buying dinner. That is a shame." Derek looked like he was about to explode. He needed a scapegoat. He needed someone to blame for his incompetence. He marched over to me and shoved the club into my chest. "It is the clubs," he hissed. "They are unbalanced." I bet you dropped the bag, didn't you? You bent them. I didn't drop anything, Derek. Don't lie to me. Here, if it is so easy, you do it. Show us how it is done since you are so perfect. He was mocking me, trying to humiliate me further to distract from his own failure. He expected me to refuse or to swing and miss the ball entirely, giving them all something to laugh at. Go on, Sarah called out from her cart. Let the caddy have a turn. Maybe she has beginner's luck. I looked at the club in my hand. It was a 7-iron. I looked at the flag waving in the distance across the water. Something in me shifted. I was tired of the heat. I was tired of the heavy bag. I was tired of pretending to be weak. I walked to the tee box. I didn't address the ball like a golfer. I walked up to it like a dancer approaching center stage. I planted my feet. I didn't think about grip or stance. I thought about my core. I thought about the torque of a pirouette. I looked at the ball. I took a deep breath. And then I moved. It wasn't a golf swing. It was a fluid, kinetic chain of energy. My hips initiated the rotation, my spine followed, and my arms whipped through with the speed of a lash. Crack. The sound was different from Derek's shots. It was crisp, pure, and explosive. The ball took flight. It didn't hook. It didn't slice. It cut through the air in a perfect high arc, clearing the water with ease. It landed softly on the green, took one bounce and rolled. We all watched in silence. The ball rolled closer and closer to the flag. And then it disappeared. It dropped into the cup, a hole in one. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind rustling the leaves. I lowered the club and turned to look at them. Sarah's mouth was hanging open. Andre looked like he had seen a ghost. And Derek looked absolutely purple. I walked over to him and shoved the club back into the bag. The clubs seem fine to me, Derek, I said, my voice cool and steady. It must be the operator. I picked up the heavy bag and slung it over my shoulder again. Now, are we going to finish the back 9, or are you done embarrassing yourself for the day? I started walking toward the bridge that crossed the lake, not waiting for them. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I didn't look back. I knew I had just blown my cover of the clumsy, uncoordinated wife. But as I walked with the rhythm of a victor, I realized I didn't care. The game was changing, and I was done playing by their rules. The drive back from the golf course was suffocating. Derek did not say the word to me. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white and the veins in his neck pulsed with a dangerous rhythm. I sat in the passenger seat staring out at the passing highway trees, trying to slow my own heart rate. I knew I had crossed a line. I had humiliated him in front of the very people he lived to impress. By sinking that hole in one, I had shattered the illusion of the clumsy, incompetent wife he needed me to be. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't even turn off the engine. "Get out," he spat without looking at me. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Are you coming in?" "I am going to the club," he said, his voice flat and cold. "I need a drink. I need to be around people who respect me. Don't wait up." I watched him reverse out of the driveway, tires screeching slightly on the asphalt. As the silver BMW disappeared around the corner, a wave of relief washed over me, so powerful my knees almost buckled. He was gone. The house was mine. For a few hours at least, I could stop pretending. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool, silent hallway. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady sound that usually comforted me, but today it felt heavy. I walked straight to the master bedroom closet. I pushed aside the rows of Derek's expensive suits and my own drab cardigans until I reached the back corner. I knelt down and pried up the loose floorboard I had discovered 3 years ago. Underneath, nestled in the insulation, was a battered shoebox. It was just a cardboard box, but to me, it was a reliquary. I pulled it out and carried it to the bed, sitting cross-legged in the center of the mattress. I opened the lid. The smell of rosin and satin drifted up, a scent that instantly transported me back to the wings of the Lincoln Center. Inside lay a pair of pale pink point shoes. The satin was worn at the tips, the ribbons frayed, but the shank was still strong. I ran my fingers over the hard boxed toe, remembering the feeling of weightlessness, the feeling of being a creature of air and fire. Next to the shoes was a thick envelope I had retrieved from my secret P.O. box just yesterday. I hadn't dared to open it while Derek was home. It was from the Henderson Arts Foundation, Liam's foundation. I slid a letter opener under the flap and pulled out the contents. It wasn't just a letter, it was a check. A cashier's check made out to the Swan Trust for $500,000. The attached note was handwritten on heavy cream paper. Jasmine, this is a seed grant for the West End restoration. I know you are the trustee. Let us build something beautiful together. I hope you are ready to fly again. Liam. I stared at the numbers. $500,000. It was a fortune to most people, but to the foundation it was just the beginning. It was proof that Liam was serious. He didn't want to pave over my history, he wanted to fund it. He respected the artist in me that Derek had spent 5 years trying to erase. I held the check in one hand and the point shoes in the other, tears pricking my eyes. For the first time in forever I felt seen. I felt valuable. Not as a wife or a servant, but as a creator. I was so lost in the moment, so wrapped in the possibility of a new future, that I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear the heavy footsteps on the stairs. The bedroom door flew open with a bang that made me jump so hard I dropped the shoe. "Forgot my wallet," Derek growled, storming into the room. He stopped dead. Time seemed to freeze. I sat there on the bed, the shoebox open, the pink satin shoe lying on the duvet, and the check still clutched in my hand. Derek's eyes darted from my face to the shoe, and then to the piece of paper in my hand. He blinked, trying to process the tableau. He saw the name on the check. Henderson Arts Foundation. He saw the signature. Liam Henderson. And then he saw the amount. 5 zeros. His face went from confused to pale and then to a terrifying shade of red. The smell of whiskey wafted off him even from across the room. He had started drinking early. "What is that?" he whispered. I tried to cover the check to slide it back into the envelope, but his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was bruising. I said, "What is that, Jasmine?" He ripped the check from my hand. He read it, his lips moving silently. $500,000. Liam Henderson. He looked at me with a mixture of horror and disgust that chilled me to the bone. "So it is true," he said, his voice shaking. "Derek, wait." I began scrambling off the bed. "It is not what you think. It is a grant. For the arts. A grant," he shouted, throwing the check onto the floor. "Do not lie to me. I saw how he looked at you at dinner. I saw you two whispering at the library. And now this. $500,000, Jasmine. Nobody gives a librarian $500,000 for arts." He kicked the point shoes off the bed, sending them skittering across the floor. "This is payment, isn't it? This is for services rendered." "No, Derek," I screamed. "It is for the building. For the West End." He laughed, a manic, unhinged sound. "Oh, right. The West End. The project I am trying to get. You are sleeping with the competition to sabotage me. Or maybe you are just whoring yourself out to help me get the bid. Is that it? Are you trying to be helpful in your own sick, twisted way?" He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. "I knew it. Sarah was right. My mother was right. You are nothing but a gold digger, a cheap streetwalker who got lucky." He aimed the camera at the bed. Click. He took a picture of the open box. Click. He took a picture of the check lying on the carpet. Click. He took a picture of me standing there, terrified and crying. "Derek, stop. Please don't do this." "Oh, I am doing this," he yelled, typing furiously on the screen. "I am sending this to everyone. I am sending this to my mother, to Sarah, to Andre. They need to see who you really are. They need to see that the innocent little mouse is actually a high-priced prostitute." The message swoosh sound echoed in the room. Once, twice, sent, he said, looking up at me with eyes full of hate. You are finished, Jasmine. I am going to ruin you. I am going to take everything. This house, this car, your reputation. By the time I am done with you, you won't be able to get a job sweeping floors in this town. He grabbed the check from the floor and stuffed it into his pocket. I am keeping this. Evidence. And maybe compensation for the pain and suffering you have caused me. He turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me standing in the wreckage of my secret. I looked at my point shoes lying on the floor, one of them overturned like a dead bird. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had exposed my shame. But as I wiped the tears from my face, I realized he had made a fatal mistake. He had taken the check, he had stolen property belonging to a charitable trust, and he had sent photographic evidence of his theft to the entire family. My fear began to harden into something colder, something sharper. You want a war, Derek, I whispered to the empty room. You just declared one on the wrong woman, and you just gave me the ammunition to end it. The next morning felt less like a Sunday and more like an execution day. I walked into my own living room to find the jury already seated. Derek had assembled the firing squad. His mother, Barbara, sat in the center of the beige sectional sofa, clutching a handkerchief to her chest, as if she were at a funeral. Beside her sat Andre, looking uncomfortable but complicit, and next to him was Sarah, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Derek stood by the fireplace, acting as the prosecutor. His arms crossed, his face set in a mask of righteous indignation. They all stopped talking when I entered. The silence was thick and judgmental. I was wearing a simple black dress, not because I was mourning my marriage, but because I wanted to look sharp. I wanted to look like a blade. Sit down, Jasmine, Derek commanded, pointing to a solitary wooden chair he had placed in the middle of the room facing them. It was theatrical and ridiculous. He was trying to recreate a courtroom scene he had probably seen in a movie. I didn't sit. I stood behind the chair, my hands resting lightly on the back. I prefer to stand, I said, my voice steady. Barbara let out a loud sob. Look at her, Derek. She has no shame. Standing there like nothing happened after dragging our family name through the mud. Jasmine, Derek began, his voice booming. We are all here because we love you. Or at least, we tried to love you. But your behavior has made it impossible to ignore the truth any longer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled check. He held it up for the room to see. $500,000, he announced. From Liam Henderson, a man she claims she barely knows, a man who just happens to be a billionaire. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. It is disgusting, Jasmine. My brother is a respectable man. For you to seduce him for money, to take advantage of his kindness, it is predatory. I always knew you were trash, but I didn't know you were expensive trash. I looked at Sarah. Her hypocrisy was breathtaking. This was the woman who married Andre for his last name and spent every dime he earned before the direct deposit even hit. You have it all wrong, I said quietly. Don't interrupt me, Derek shouted, stepping closer. We have the evidence, Jasmine. The shoes, the money, the secret meetings at the library. It all fits. You aren't satisfied with a hardworking husband. You wanted more. You wanted the high life. So you sold yourself. He turned to his mother. Mom, tell her what you think. Barbara wiped her dry eyes. I am disappointed, Jasmine. I thought you were a good Christian girl. I told Derek he was marrying down, but I thought at least you had morals. To think of you doing unspeakable things with that man for money, it breaks my heart. You have brought shame on this house. The accusations rain down on me like stones. Whore, gold digger, liar, manipulator. They threw every ugly word they could find at me, feeding off each other's energy. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a villain. They needed me to be the bad guy so they could feel superior, so Derek could feel like a victim instead of a failure. Finally, Derek held up a hand to silence them. But because I am a benevolent man, Derek said, puffing out his chest, I am willing to offer you a path to redemption. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up a document. Option 1, we divorce immediately. You sign this paper admitting to adultery. You leave this house with nothing, no alimony, no car, No savings. You go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Or option 2. You apologize. Right now, you get on your knees and you beg my mother for forgiveness. You beg Sarah for forgiveness. And you transfer that $500,000 into my company account. The room went silent. Excuse me, I asked. You heard me? Derek said, a greedy glint in his eyes. You call it restitution. Damages for emotional distress. You give me that money to invest in my business where it can actually do some good. You quit your job at the library, and you spend the next 10 years making it up to me. Maybe then I will consider staying married to you. Sarah nodded vigorously. It is more than you deserve, Jasmine. If I were Derek, I would throw you out on the street right now. But he is too generous. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw Barbara, a bitter old woman who measured love in obedience. I saw Andre, a coward who let his wife run his life. I saw Sarah, a bully terrified of her own mediocrity. And I saw Derek, my husband. A man so small, so insecure that he had to stand on my neck just to feel tall. He wanted me to pay him for the privilege of being abused. He wanted to use my grant money, the money meant for art and beauty, to fund his concrete monstrosity. Something inside me uncoiled. A knot of tension I had been carrying for 5 years suddenly loosened. I started to chuckle. It began as a low rumble in my chest, but it quickly bubbled up into a laugh, a real, genuine laugh. Derek frowned. What is so funny? I couldn't stop. I laughed at the absurdity of it all. I laughed at their arrogance. I laughed at the wooden chair in the middle of the room. Stop laughing, Derek yelled, his face turning red. Stop it right now. You are crazy. I took a deep breath, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. I straightened up. I released the back of the chair and stepped around it, moving into the center of the room. My posture shifted. I wasn't the librarian anymore. I stood with the regal bearing of a principal dancer commanding the stage. I am not crazy, Derek, I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. I am just relieved. Relieved, Sarah scoffed. You are about to lose everything. No, Sarah, I said, turning to her. I am about to gain everything back. I looked at Derek. You want an apology. You want me to kneel. You want my money. I walked up to him until I was inches from his face. He flinched instinctively, intimidated by the sudden change in my energy. I have waited for this moment for a long time, I said, soft and dangerous. I promised your father I would take care of you. I promised him I would try. And I did. For 5 years I made myself small so you wouldn't feel threatened. I wore cheap clothes so you could wear suits. I drove a sedan so you could drive a BMW. I hid my light so you could shine. I glanced at the check in his hand. But you are right about one thing, Derek. That check is for services rendered, but not the kind you think. That is a grant, for the owner of the West End Arts District. Derek looked confused. The owner, but nobody knows who the owner is. I smiled, a shark smile. They do now. I reached out and plucked the check from his loose grip. He was too stunned to stop me. I am the owner, Derek. I am the trustee of the Swan Trust. I own the land. I own the building. And I own the very ground you are standing on right now. The room erupted in chaos. What is she talking about? Barbara screeched. She is lying. She is delusional. I turned to face them all. And as for this house that you are so proud of, Derek, the one you locked me inside of. Did you really think the bank approved a mortgage for a man with your credit score? Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I bought this house, I said. Cash. 5 years ago. Your name is on the deed as a courtesy that I revoked yesterday when I filed for divorce. Divorce, Derek whispered, the color draining from his face. Yes, I said, walking toward the door. And since this is my house and you are all trespassing, I suggest you start packing. You have 1 hour before I call the police. And Derek, do not touch the savings account. I froze it this morning. I turned back one last time to see them frozen in their seats, a tableau of shock and ruin. Oh, and Sarah, I added, tell your brother I said hello, and tell him I am ready to dance. I walked out of the living room, leaving the silence behind me. It was the best performance of my life. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, when the dust is settling, and nobody is quite sure who is still breathing. Derek stood frozen, his hand still reaching for the check I had taken back. His mother Barbara was clutching her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Sarah looked as if she had just swallowed a lemon. I didn't give them time to recover. I didn't give them time to spin a new narrative or launch another attack. I reached into the pocket of my black dress and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact I had saved simply as Davis. "What are you doing?" Derek asked, his voice cracking. "Who are you calling?" I ignored him. I pressed the call button and put it on speaker. The ringtone echoed through the large living room, bouncing off the high ceilings that Derek claimed he paid for. One ring, two rings. Jasmine, a deep baritone voice, answered. "Is everything all right, Mr. Davis?" I said, keeping my eyes locked on my husband. "I need you to execute Protocol 4 immediately." There was a pause on the other end. "Protocol 4. Are you sure, Jasmine? That is the scorched earth option. Once we start this, there is no going back." "I am sure," I said, my voice steady. "Please freeze all joint accounts, cancel the supplemental credit cards issued to Derek Vance, and file the eviction notice we prepared last month. They are currently trespassing on the property." "Consider it done," Davis said. "I am sending the confirmation to your email now." "And Jasmine, I am sorry it came to this." "I am not," I said, and hung up. The room erupted. "You can't do that!" Derek screamed, lunging toward me. "You can't freeze my accounts. That is my money. I earned that money." I stepped back, holding up a hand. Derek stopped inches from me, panting like a trapped animal. "Your money," I repeated calmly. "Let us do the math, Derek. You make a decent salary as a creative director, but you spend it on leased cars, designer suits, and golf memberships to impress people who don't care about you. You spend it on gambling debts that you thought I didn't know about." I walked over to the fireplace mantel where a framed photo of us on our wedding day sat. I picked it up and looked at it. "For 5 years I have been depositing 80% of my income into our joint account," I continued. "But not my library income, Derek. My investment income. The royalties from the ballets I choreographed. The dividends from the West End properties." I turned the photo face down. "You thought we were living on your salary because it made you feel like a man. But the truth is, Derek, you haven't paid a mortgage bill in this house since the day we moved in. You have been paying for the cable and the water. I have been paying for everything else." Liar, Barbara shrieked from the sofa. "My son is a provider. He took you in when you were nothing." I looked at the old woman with pity. "He didn't take me in, Barbara. I bought this house." I turned back to Derek, who was now trembling. "Do you remember signing the closing papers, Derek? Do you remember how many documents there were? You were so busy celebrating with champagne that you didn't even read what you were signing." Derek's eyes widened as a memory surfaced. "I put a clause in the deed," I said. "A revert clause. Your name was on the title as a tenant in common, solely contingent on our continued marriage and your fidelity. The moment you filed for divorce or the moment I proved adultery, your ownership stake reverted 100% to the Swan Trust." "I didn't commit adultery," he stammered. "You did. You are the one with Liam." I smiled. "But you are the one who just admitted to the entire room that you wanted to divorce me unless I paid you. You are the one who threatened to ruin me. That is constructive abandonment, Derek, and attempted extortion. My lawyer has the recording of this entire conversation." I pointed to the small security camera nestled discreetly on the bookshelf, the one Derek had installed to watch the cleaning lady, but had forgotten was connected to my cloud account. The color drained from his face completely. He looked at the camera, then back at me. He realized the trap had snapped shut. But, but my capital, he whispered. The home equity loan. I signed the papers yesterday. The bank promised me the money. I laughed softly. You signed a piece of paper, Derek. But since you don't actually own the house, and since my signature on that document was visibly different from my legal signature on file with the trust, that loan application is void. It is fraud, actually. And when the bank finds out you tried to mortgage a house you don't own, well, I imagine your firm won't be very happy about that. Sarah stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I am leaving. This is insane. You are insane. She grabbed her purse and started toward the door, dragging Andre with her. Sit down, Sarah, I said, my voice cracking like a whip. Nobody leaves until the police get here. Police, she squawked. You called the police. I checked my watch. They should be here in about 2 minutes. I requested a civil standby to assist with the removal of unwanted guests. Derek sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. It is a nightmare of your own making, Derek, I said. You wanted a trophy wife. You wanted a silent partner. You wanted someone to look good on your arm while you spent money you didn't have. But you forgot one thing. I walked over to him and leaned down, whispering in his ear. You forgot that before I was a librarian, I was a performer, and I know how to hold a pose until the curtain falls. The sound of sirens cut through the air. They were getting louder coming up the street. Barbara started wailing. My blood pressure. You are killing me. Save the drama for the officers, Barbara, I said, straightening up. A moment later, heavy pounding echoed from the front door. Police, open up. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing there was Officer Miller, a large man with a kind face who worked the security detail at the library on weekends. He knew me. He respected me. And he knew exactly what was happening. Mrs. Vance, Officer Miller said, touching the brim of his hat. We received a call about a disturbance and trespassing. I stepped aside, gesturing to the living room where the Vance family sat in various states of shock and terror. Yes, officer, I said. These people have been asked to leave my property and are refusing to comply. And I believe the man on the sofa has just confessed to attempting to extort $500,000 from me. I would like them removed. Immediately. Officer Miller stepped into the house, his hand resting on his belt. He looked at Derek, who was now sobbing into his hands. He looked at Sarah, who was trying to hide behind Andre. All right, folks, he said, his voice booming. You heard the lady? The party is over. Derek looked up, his eyes red and swollen. But this is my house. I live here. Not anymore, Sir, Officer Miller said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. I have a digital copy of a restraining order and an eviction notice filed by Mrs. Vance's attorney 10 minutes ago. It seems everything is in order. You have 5 minutes to grab your personal essentials and vacate the premises. Or I can arrest you for criminal trespassing. Your choice. Derek looked at me one last time. He looked for the fear he was used to seeing. He looked for the hesitation. But all he saw was the black swan, cool and untouchable. He stood up shakily. Come on, Mom. Come on, Sarah. They shuffled toward the door like beaten dogs. Sarah tried to glare at me as she passed, but when she met my eyes, she looked away quickly. Andre just mumbled a sorry that nobody heard. I stood in the doorway watching them pile into their cars. Derek's BMW wouldn't start at first, probably because I had disabled the starter remotely through the app, another little perk of paying the bills. When it finally sputtered to life, he peeled out of the driveway without looking back. Officer Miller tipped his hat to me. Will you be all right here alone, Mrs. Vance? I looked at the empty street, then back at my quiet, empty house. I am not alone, officer, I said, smiling. I have myself back. I closed the heavy oak door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt sounded like the sweetest music I had ever heard. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down to the floor. I didn't cry. I just breathed. The house was silent, but for the first time in 5 years, it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I pulled the business card from my bra. The gold letters of Henderson Arts Foundation caught the light. Step 1 was clearing the stage. Step 2 was the performance. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. Hello, Liam answered on the first ring as if he had been waiting. It is Jasmine, I said. I am ready to talk about the West End, and I am ready to dance. The silence in my house was blissful, but my phone was vibrating so hard against the kitchen counter it threatened to walk off the edge. Derek had been calling non-stop since he and his circus of a family had been escorted off the premises by Officer Miller. I did not pick up. Instead, I let the voicemails roll in listening to them, while I sipped a glass of vintage wine that Derek had bought for a special occasion that never came. The first few messages were threats. He screamed about lawyers, about suing me for illegal eviction, about how I was delusional if I thought I owned anything. But as the hours wore on and reality set in, the tone changed. I could hear the background noise of a mid-range hotel lobby. I could hear Sarah shrieking about the thread count of the sheets, and Barbara complaining that her blood sugar was dropping because room service was taking too long. Derek's voice in the later messages sounded frantic. He was trying to rationalize the situation. Jasmine, stop this game, he pleaded. I know you are hurt. I know I pushed you too far. But lying about owning the West End, lying about the house, it is too much. You are going to get yourself in serious legal trouble. Just pick up the phone and we can fix this. I will even let you keep the car if you just unlock the accounts. He still didn't believe me. Even after the police, even after the eviction notice, his ego would not allow him to accept that his quiet librarian wife held all the cards. He thought I was bluffing. He thought I was having a mental breakdown, and that eventually I would come to my senses, apologize, and open the door. He had no idea that while he was trying to figure out how to pay for a hotel room with a frozen credit card, I was reviewing his company's bid for the West End project. I knew exactly what Derek was doing for the next 48 hours. He was desperate. And a desperate Derek was a dangerous mix of manic energy and blind arrogance. He believed that the presentation to J&L Holdings on Tuesday was his salvation. In his mind, if he won the contract, if he secured the deal to redevelop the arts district, he would be a made man. The commission alone would be enough to get him out of debt, buy a new house, and hire a team of lawyers to crush me. I could imagine him in that cramped hotel room, spreading blueprints out on the bed, forcing Andre to rehearse their pitch over and over again. He would be sweating, pacing back and forth, fueled by cheap coffee and the terrified hope that he was still the golden boy. He was betting everything on this pitch. He was designing a future where he was the king and I was the peasant he had graciously discarded. The irony was that the proposal he was working so hard on, the vision he was going to present to the board, was generic. I had seen his drafts months ago on his laptop. He wanted to tear down the historic brick warehouses and replace them with glass condos and a shopping mall. He wanted to turn a sanctuary of culture into a monument to consumerism. He thought he was pitching to Liam Henderson, the billionaire investor. He thought he just had to charm one man. He didn't know that the bylaws of the Swan Trust required unanimous approval from both the financing partner and the property owner. He didn't know that the person he had to impress, the person who held the rubber stamp, was the woman he had called terrible in bed. Monday passed in a blur of preparation. While Derek was likely screaming at a hotel receptionist, I was sitting in a private conference room at the J&L headquarters. Liam had brought me in through the executive entrance to avoid any chance of running into Derek's team early. Meeting Liam in a professional setting was intense. He didn't treat me like a charity case or a damsel in distress. He treated me like a partner. We sat with his board of directors reviewing the legal framework for the revitalization. I spoke about the history of the buildings, about the acoustics of the old warehouse that would become the main theater. I watched the board members nod in agreement. I watched them respect me. At the end of the meeting, Liam walked me to the elevator. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked. It is going to be ugly when he sees you. I am not afraid of ugly, I said. I lived with ugly for 5 years, Liam. I lived with a man who made me feel ugly every single day. Tomorrow isn't about revenge. It is about revelation. Liam smiled. I have a stylist coming to your house at 6. We need you to look the part. I don't need a stylist, I said. I know exactly what I am wearing. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I showered and stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. The last time I had really looked at myself in this mirror, I was wearing the red dress Derek had forced on me. The dress that was too tight, too low, and made me feel like an object. Today was different. I reached into the back of the closet where I had moved my old performance clothes and my new purchases. I pulled out a suit I had commissioned weeks ago when I first started planning my escape. It was black. Not the dull black of a funeral, but the deep, rich black of a raven's wing. The fabric was Italian wool blended with silk so it caught the light when I moved. The trousers were wide-legged, allowing for movement flowing like water around my ankles. The jacket was tailored to perfection, nipped at the waist with sharp architectural shoulders that gave me a silhouette of power. I put it on. It felt like armor. I didn't wear a blouse underneath, just the jacket buttoned low enough to be daring, but high enough to command respect. I pulled my hair back, but not into the severe bun of a librarian. I slicked it back tight, exposing my neck and my face, putting my features on display. I applied my makeup with precision, highlighting my cheekbones and painting my lips a deep blood red. I stepped into a pair of stilettos. They were 4 inches high, the kind of shoes that required balance and core strength, the kind of shoes that made you tower over men like Derek. I looked at my reflection. The mouse was gone. The librarian was gone. Staring back at me was the black swan, dark, mysterious, and dangerous. I grabbed my leather portfolio, which contained the original deed to the West End property and the rejection letter I had already drafted for Derek's firm. I walked down the stairs of my house, the sound of my heels echoing on the wood. I was not walking to a car to be driven by a husband who despised me. I was walking to my own destiny. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Derek. Good luck today, honey. I am going to win this for us, and then we can talk about how you are going to fix this mess you made. I stared at the screen and laughed. He was still delusional. He still thought there was an us. He still thought he was the protagonist of this story. I typed a single reply. See you in the boardroom. I hit send and walked out the door. The air was crisp and cold, but it felt like freedom. The final act was about to begin, and I knew exactly how it would end. Derek was expecting a pitch meeting. He was walking into a slaughter. The elevator ride to the top floor of the J&L Holdings building felt like an ascension to Olympus. The walls were made of glass, revealing the sprawling Atlanta skyline below a kingdom that Derek believed was about to be his. He stood in the center of the car, adjusting his silk tie for the 10th time. His manic energy was palpable, filling the small space. Andre stood next to him, holding the tube of blueprints, his forehead glistening with sweat despite the air conditioning. Sarah had insisted on coming along, claiming she was his lucky charm, but I knew she just wanted to be close to the smell of money. She was wearing a tweed suit that looked like a costume of a supportive wife, inspecting her reflection in the glass with a smug satisfaction. This is it, Derek said to his reflection. This is the big leagues. Once we sign this deal, everything changes. No more scraping by. No more dealing with Jasmine's drama. We are going to be untouchable. Sarah squeezed his arm. You were born for this, Derek. Liam is going to eat out of your hand. He is a businessman first. He won't let family awkwardness get in the way of a profit. The elevator doors chimed and slid open, revealing a lobby that screamed power. The floors were white marble, the reception desk was a slab of raw obsidian, and the silence was heavy and expensive. A receptionist with a headset looked up and smiled, a professional, practiced smile. Mr. Vance, she said, Mr. Henderson and the board are expecting you in the main conference room. Derek strode down the hallway like he owned the building. He didn't look like a man who had been evicted from his home 24 hours ago. He looked like a conqueror. He pushed open the double mahogany doors and marched into the room. It was an impressive space. A long table made of reclaimed wood dominated the room, surrounded by 20 leather chairs. At the far end sat Liam Henderson. He looked calm, almost bored, flipping through a file. Around him sat 5 other board members, men and women in sharp suits, who watched Derek enter with impassive faces. Liam looked up. His expression gave nothing away. No anger about the dinner. No pity about the eviction. Just cold business. Derek, Liam said, gesturing to the empty seats. Please, begin. Derek wasted no time. He signaled Andre to unroll the blueprints on the table. He launched into his pitch, his voice smooth and rehearsed. He moved around the room using his hands to paint a picture of the future he wanted to build. Gentlemen and ladies, he began. The West End Arts District as it stands today is a wasted opportunity. It is a collection of rotting warehouses covered in graffiti, occupied by squatters who call themselves artists. It is dirty, it is unsafe, and it is bleeding value. He pointed to a rendering of a gleaming glass tower. My vision is to sanitize the area. We tear down the old textile factory. We demolish the theater. In their place, we build this, the Vance Center. Luxury condominiums with a retail complex on the ground floor. We bring in high-end brands. We bring in security. We push out the riffraff and we bring in the tax revenue. He paused for effect, looking around the room for approval. Some people talk about preserving culture, he scoffed. But let us be honest. Poverty is not culture. Mold is not history. These buildings are an eyesore. I am offering you a chance to clean up the city, to replace the ugly with the profitable. I watched from my mind's eye, knowing exactly what he was saying because I had read his notes. He was insulting the very soul of the district. He was calling my life's work an eyesore. He was calling the mural I painted on the side of the theater graffiti. Sarah nodded vigorously from the sidelines, looking at the board members, as if expecting them to applaud. Derek concluded his presentation with a flourish, slamming his hand on the table. J&L Holdings needs a partner with the guts to do what is necessary. I am that partner. Together we can erase the past and build a profitable future. He stood there, chest heaving, waiting for the praise. The room was silent for a long moment. Liam slowly closed the file in front of him. He clasped his hands together and leaned forward. It is a very thorough presentation, Derek, Liam said, his voice neutral. The financial projections are certainly ambitious. Derek beamed. I am glad you see the potential, Liam. However, Liam continued, there is one significant hurdle. As you know, this project is a joint venture. J&L Holdings provides the construction capital, but the land itself is owned by a private trust. The Swan Trust. Derek waved his hand dismissively. Yes, the trust. My lawyers have looked into it. It is just a shell company, right? We can buy them out. Everyone has a price. Liam shook his head slightly, a small, unreadable smile playing on his lips. Not everyone, Derek. The bylaws of the joint venture state that the trustee of the Swan Trust has absolute veto power over any development plans. We cannot lay a single brick without the owner's approval. Well, where is he? Derek asked, looking around. Let us get him on the phone. I can sell this to him. I can sell ice to an Eskimo. He is not on the phone, Liam said, checking his watch. In fact, the owner insisted on being here in person to hear your pitch. Derek looked confused. Here. Now. Liam nodded toward the large double doors at the back of the room. Yes. She should be arriving right about now. The heavy mahogany doors didn't just open. They were pushed. The sound of stilettos on marble echoed through the silent conference room. Click, clack, click, clack. It was a rhythm of pure intimidation, steady and unhurried. Every head in the room turned. Derek spun around, a confident smile ready on his lips, prepared to charm whoever walked through that door. I stepped into the room. The air conditioning seemed to drop 10 degrees. I was not wearing the beige cardigans Derek loved. I was not wearing the sensible flats of a librarian. I was wearing the black Italian wool suit that fit like a second skin. My hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp angles of my face. My lips were painted a deep crimson, and in my hand I held a black leather portfolio. For a solid 5 seconds, Derek didn't recognize me. He saw a powerful woman. He saw a threat. And then his brain caught up with his eyes. Jasmine. He breathed my name like it was a question. His confusion was so profound it was almost comical. He looked at my suit. He looked at my shoes. He looked at the way I stood with my chin raised and my shoulders back. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, stepping toward me, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Are you stalking me? Did you follow me here to make a scene?" Sarah jumped up from her chair, her face twisting into a sneer. "Oh my God. She actually showed up. Jasmine, this is a business meeting. You cannot just barge in here because you are hysterical about the divorce." Derek grabbed my arm, trying to steer me back toward the door. "Look, Jasmine, I know you are upset, but you need to leave. We're in the middle of a multi-million-dollar deal. Go wait in the lobby. Better yet, go get us some coffee. If you make yourself useful, maybe I will talk to you later." I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked up at his face. I didn't say a word. I simply pulled my arm away. It wasn't a violent jerk. It was a smooth, controlled movement that broke his grip effortlessly. I walked past him. I ignored Sarah, who was sputtering in indignation. I walked past Andre, who was staring at me with his mouth open. I walked the length of the long wooden table, the sound of my heels punctuating the silence. I walked straight to the head of the table where there was one empty chair next to Liam. The chairman's seat. "Jasmine, what do you think you are doing?" Derek shouted, losing his composure. "Get away from there. That is for the owner." I pulled the leather chair out and sat down. I crossed my legs and placed my portfolio on the table. I looked at Liam, who gave me a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice clear and authoritative. "My apologies for the delay. The traffic coming from the hotel where my husband is currently staying was terrible." Liam smiled. "No apology necessary, Ms. Vance. We were just reviewing the proposal." Derek stood frozen in the middle of the room. His face was a mask of pure horror. He looked from me to Liam and back to me. The dots were connecting in his mind, but he couldn't bring himself to believe the picture they made. "Ms. Vance," Derek whispered. "No. No, that is impossible. You are a librarian. You file papers." I slowly unzipped my portfolio. I pulled out a single document printed on heavy bond paper. It was the deed to the West End property, and stamped clearly at the bottom was the seal of the Swan Trust signed by Jasmine Vance. I looked at Derek. My eyes were cold. "I am a librarian, Derek. I preserve history. But before that, I was a creator. And I am the founder and sole trustee of the Black Swan Trust." I tapped the document with a manicured fingernail. "I own the warehouse you want to demolish. I own the theater you want to bulldoze. I own the ground you are standing on, metaphorically speaking." Derek staggered back as if I had punched him. Sarah let out a small, strangled squeak and slumped into her chair. I picked up Derek's proposal, the glossy booklet he had spent thousands of dollars printing. I flipped through it casually. "I have reviewed your bid," I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on him. "It is technically competent, I suppose. The math works." Derek's eyes lit up with a tiny flicker of hope. A desperate, pathetic hope that money would override everything. But I continued closing the booklet. "It lacks soul. It is destructive. It is arrogant." I stood up, leaning over the table. "You called my tenants squatters, Derek. You called my art graffiti. You looked at a community that has survived for decades, and all you saw was something to be scraped off the bottom of your shoe." I slid his proposal back across the table. It slid until it fell off the edge and hit the floor with a dull thud. "The Swan Trust formally rejects your proposal. We will not be partnering with your firm. Not now. Not ever." Derek looked at the booklet on the floor. He looked like a man watching his life bleed out. Why, he croaked. "Why are you doing this?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Because the proposal is lacking humanity, Derek. It is cold. It is selfish." And honestly, the presentation was terrible. I paused, letting the final words hang in the air, waiting to deliver the blow that would end him. It was stiff. It had no rhythm, no passion. Frankly, Derek, your skills in the boardroom are just like your skills as a husband. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a scream. Absolutely disappointing. Derek collapsed into the nearest chair, buried his face in his hands, and wept. I didn't look away. I didn't feel sorry. I just turned to Liam and opened my file, ready to get to work. The stage was mine now. I picked up the remote control that Derek had dropped on the table. He flinched as if I were picking up a weapon, and in a way I was. I pointed it at the large projection screen behind me, where the rendering of his soulless glass tower still glowed. You spent 40 minutes talking about value, Derek, I said, pressing the button. You talked about net worth. You talked about assets. But you never bothered to check the assets of the woman you slept next to for 5 years. The screen flickered and changed. Gone was the Vance Center. In its place was a high-resolution photograph of me on stage at the Paris Opera House, mid-leap, my body arched in perfect suspension. Underneath it was a list of accolades. The Prix Benoit de la Danse, the Nijinsky Award. Derek stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open, but I didn't stop there. I clicked the button again. The next slide showed a portfolio of investments. It wasn't just the West End. It showed equity in galleries in New York, holdings in London real estate, and a diversified stock portfolio that had been managed aggressively for a decade. The final number at the bottom of the screen was in the 8 figures. I watched Sarah's eyes scan the numbers. I watched the blood drain from her face until she looked like a wax figure. She was doing the math in her head, realizing that the librarian she had mocked for driving a sedan could have bought and sold her entire family 3 times over. You see, Sarah, I said, my voice conversational. You were so worried about me digging for gold, you didn't realize I was the mine. Sarah let out a small, choked sound. She looked at her brother Liam, hoping for him to deny it, to say it was a joke. But Liam just sat there looking at the screen with pride. Derek looked from the screen to me. The arrogance was completely gone now, replaced by a raw, terrifying panic. He realized the scale of his mistake. He realized he hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost a lottery ticket. He did something then that made me lose the last shred of respect I held for him. He slid out of his chair and fell to his knees. Right there on the expensive boardroom carpet, in front of the board of directors, in front of his brother and sister-in-law, my husband crawled toward me. Jasmine, he pleaded, reaching for my hand. Baby, please, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? If I had known you were this, I would have treated you like a queen. I pulled my hand away in disgust. That is the problem, Derek. You only treat people with respect if you think they have money. You shouldn't have needed a bank statement to treat me like a human being. I was under so much pressure, he cried, tears streaming down his face. It was the job, the debts. I did it for us, Jasmine. I wanted to build this for us, so I could be worthy of you. I looked down at him. He was pathetic. A man who measured his worth in concrete and steel was now crumbling like sand. Stop lying, Derek, I said, cold and sharp. You didn't do it for us. You did it for your ego. And speaking of your job, I have one more slide to show you. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed to a scanned document. It was a forensic accounting report. It highlighted a series of transfers from the firm's escrow account into a private offshore account. Derek stopped crying instantly. He stared at the screen, his eyes bulging. When you forced me to sign those mortgage papers yesterday, I told you I had frozen our accounts, I said. But I also triggered an automatic audit. My lawyers traced the initial deposit you claimed you had for the project. I pointed to the screen. You didn't have $200,000 of your own capital, Derek. You embezzled it from your current clients to pay for the buy-in on this project. You were robbing Peter to pay Paul, hoping the commission from the West End deal would cover the hole before anyone noticed. The boardroom went deadly silent. The board members, who had been watching the drama with fascination, now looked at Derek with professional horror. Embezzlement was not a domestic dispute. It was a felony. Liam leaned forward. Derek Vance, you are hereby disqualified from any future bidding with J&L Holdings. And given the nature of this evidence, I have a legal obligation to report this to the authorities and to your current partners. Derek tried to stand up, but his legs gave way. Andre grabbed him by the arm, trying to hold him up, but Andre looked ready to faint himself. No, Derek whispered, shaking his head. No, you can't do this. It was a loan. I was going to pay it back. Security, Liam said quietly into the intercom. The double doors opened immediately. 4 large security guards in dark suits entered the room. They didn't need instructions. 2 of them went to Derek, and 2 went to Andre. Get your hands off me, Derek screamed as they grabbed his arms. I am the victim here. She set me up. She is a witch. They dragged him toward the door, his heels dragging on the marble floor, the same floor I had walked across with such power just minutes ago. Andre went quietly, his head hung low in shame. As the doors closed on my husband's screaming figure, the room felt instantly lighter. The air seemed to clear. But we weren't done. There was still one person sitting at the table. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, clutching her designer purse like a shield. She looked at the closed doors, then at me, then finally at her brother Liam. She forced a smile onto her face, a rictus of terror. Well, she said with a nervous laugh. That was unfortunate. I had no idea Derek was doing those things. You know how men are, always taking risks. She stood up, smoothing down her tweed skirt. I am just glad you're okay, Jasmine. Really, it is quite a shock about the money, but… Well, good for you. We should do lunch sometime. Just the girls. She looked at Liam, expecting him to nod, to give her the usual pass she had received her entire life. Liam didn't smile. He didn't blink. Sit down, Sarah, he said. Sarah froze. But Liam, I should go. I need to call Andre's lawyer. I said sit down. The command was absolute. Sarah sank back into her chair, terrified. Liam stood up and walked around the table until he was standing behind me. He placed a hand on the back of my chair, a gesture of solidarity and protection. You are not going to call a lawyer, Sarah, Liam said. You are going to listen. For 30 years, I have watched you bully people. I watched you treat waiters like dirt. I watched you judge people by their zip code. But what you did to Jasmine, the way you treated her because of her background, because of her race, that ends today. Sarah's eyes widened. Liam, I am your sister. You can't be serious. I am deadly serious, Liam replied. I have instructed the family office to dissolve your trust fund, effective immediately. Sarah gasped, a sound like all the air leaving the room. You can't do that. That is my money. It is the family's money, Liam corrected. And the family has standards. I will not subsidize a racist. I will not fund a lifestyle built on cruelty. You are cut off, Sarah. No more monthly allowance. No more covering Andre's bad investments. You are on your own. But how will we live? Sarah wailed, tears finally spilling over. We have the mortgage, the club memberships, the tuition. Liam looked at her with zero sympathy. I suggest you get a job, he said. I hear the library is hiring. Sarah looked at me, hatred and desperation warring in her eyes. But she knew she had lost. She stood up shakily, her legs trembling in her expensive shoes. She didn't say another word. She couldn't. She grabbed her purse and ran out of the room, chasing after the ruins of her life. The door clicked shut. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The room was empty now except for me, Liam, and the silent board members. Liam turned to me. His face softened, the hard edge of the businessman melting away to reveal the friend, the admirer. Are you all right? He asked. I looked at the screen where my picture as the black swan still glowed. I looked at the empty chair where Derek had knelt. I stood up, smoothing my suit jacket. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. I am better than all right, Liam, I said. I am free. And as I looked around the boardroom, I knew the destruction was complete. But looking at the ashes of my old life, I didn't see ruin. I saw the perfect place to build something new. 3 months later, the air in the West End smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. It was the scent of rebirth. I stood in the center of the main rehearsal hall of the newly christened Swan Art Center. The floor was a pristine expanse of sprung oak designed to absorb the shock of 1,000 landings. Sunlight poured in through the massive industrial windows that we had restored rather than replaced. The light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, turning them into suspended gold. I walked to the bar, running my hand along the smooth wood. It was quiet now, but in an hour, this room would be filled with students. Not just the children of the wealthy who could afford expensive tuition, but kids from the neighborhood. Kids who had been told that ballet was not for them. Kids who had been told they were too loud or too poor or too different. The foundation was fully funded thanks to the proper management of the trust and the generous backing of J&L Holdings. We were not just building a school, we were building a sanctuary. I looked at my reflection in the wall of mirrors. I didn't see the woman who used to hide in cardigans. I didn't see the wife who walked on eggshells to avoid waking a husband's temper. I saw a director. I saw a leader. My hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and I was wearing simple practice clothes, but I felt more powerful than I ever had in a boardroom suit. The renovation was ahead of schedule. We had preserved the historic brick facade of the theater, cleaning away the grime to reveal the character underneath. The mural I had painted years ago had been restored, its colors vibrant against the red brick. Every decision, every tile, every fixture had been my choice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking to fit into someone else's space. I was expanding to fill my own. Across town, in a cramped diner near the interstate, the air smelled very different. It smelled of burnt coffee and stale fryer grease. The lunchtime rush was just ending, and the floor was littered with napkins and straw wrappers. Derek wiped down table 4 with a gray rag that never seemed to get fully clean. His back ached. His feet, which used to be clad in Italian leather loafers, were now swollen inside cheap, non-slip work shoes. "Hey, new guy," the manager shouted from the pass-through window. "Stop daydreaming and bust table 6. We have a party of 4 waiting." Derek flinched. The manager was a 22-year-old kid with a neck tattoo and a power complex. 3 months ago, Derek would have sneered at him. He would have made a joke about his education or his background. But today, Derek just nodded. "Yes, boss," he mumbled, keeping his head down. He walked over to table 6, grabbing the plastic bin to clear the dirty dishes. His hands, which used to sign checks and hold brandy snifters, were chapped and red from the harsh cleaning chemicals. He hated this job. He hated the uniform with its polyester polo shirt that scratched his neck. But he had no choice. The fraud investigation was ongoing. His assets were frozen. His reputation in the architectural world was radioactive. No firm in Atlanta would touch him. He was lucky to get a job that didn't require a background check. He was living in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew, driving a rusted sedan he bought for cash, and eating the mistakes from the kitchen. As he wiped the table, his eyes caught something left behind by the previous customer. It was a business magazine, a copy of Atlanta Business Chronicle. He reached out to throw it in the trash bin, but the image on the cover stopped him cold. It was a photo of a woman standing in a construction site, wearing a hard hat and a black suit. She was pointing at a blueprint surrounded by respectful men in suits. She looked fierce. She looked unstoppable. The headline read, "The Phoenix of the West End: How Jasmine Vance and the Swan Trust Are Rewriting the Rules of Urban Development." Derek stared at the photo. He stared at the face of the woman he had lived with for 5 years. The woman he had called boring. The woman he had called a dead fish. He remembered the way she used to look at him with hope. He remembered how she had tried to help him with his debts, how she had quietly paid the bills while he played the big shot. He realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach that he had held a diamond in his hands and he had treated it like a rock. He felt a tear slide down his cheek, mixing with the sweat on his face. "Hey!" the manager yelled again, slapping his hand on the counter. "Vance, move it!" Derek crushed the magazine in his hand. He threw it into the bin, burying the image of his wife under a pile of half-eaten burgers and crumpled napkins. It was where he belonged now, in the mess he had made. Back at the studio, the silence was broken by the sound of piano music. I had put on a recording of Tchaikovsky. It was the same piece I had danced to in Paris a lifetime ago. I sat on the floor and pulled my point shoes out of my bag. They were new, custom-made for my feet. I slipped them on, wrapping the pink satin ribbons around my ankles. The ritual was muscle memory. The tightness of the satin felt like a hug. I stood up. I rose onto my toes. The pain was there, sharp and familiar, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of effort, not the pain of suppression. I began to move. I didn't dance for an audience. I didn't dance for a review. I danced for myself. My body remembered everything. The extension of the leg, the arch of the back, the reach of the arms toward the light. I spun across the floor, a blur of motion and emotion. I was shedding the last layers of Jasmine the victim. I was burning away the memory of the golf course, the dinner party, the guest room. I was fire. I was air. I was the black swan. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the entrance. I slowed my spin, coming to a graceful stop, my chest heaving with exertion. Liam was standing in the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a simple button-down shirt and jeans. He looked at me across the vast empty space. He didn't clap. He didn't walk over to invade my circle. He just smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated respect. He knew that this moment belonged to me. He knew that he was not the hero of this story. He was just the witness. I smiled back. A genuine, open smile. I nodded to him, acknowledging his presence, but I didn't walk toward him. Not yet. I turned back to the mirror. I adjusted my posture, lifting my chin 1 inch higher. The music swelled to a crescendo. I was ready. The students would be arriving soon. The curtain was rising on the second act of my life. And this time I was the one writing the script. My name is Jasmine, and I learned that your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Derek looked at me and saw a servant. Liam looked at me and saw a star. But in the end, it didn't matter what either of them saw. It only mattered what I saw when I looked in the mirror. We often spend so much time trying to prove ourselves to people who are committed to misunderstanding us. We shrink, we quiet down, we hide our talents just to keep the peace. But peace bought at the price of your soul is too expensive. If you are currently making yourself small for someone else, please stop. If you are holding on to a secret dream because you are afraid of being judged, let it out. You are the author of your own story. Don't let anyone else hold the pen. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you have ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes, or if you are in the process of finding your own wings, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of their power. And remember, the only person who can define you is you.